Hi, good evening. My name is Dr. Larry Force, and I'm a professor of psychology at Mount St. Mary College and director of the Center on Aging and Disability Policy with my dear friend and colleague, Dr. Jeffrey Kahana. This is another episode of our proactive caring home and school exchange. We're here as a result of the goodwill and effort and support of New York State DDPC, Developmental Disability Planning Council. Let there be no, let's be very clear. Without DDPC being the wonderful partners that they are, we would not be sitting here. As we've talked about before, we know that what we're doing has value because our mailing list has extended. We send all of this out. We know that this has value because now we're into an additional year of our grant. Tonight's focus is on when the school bus stops coming, the transition from school to adult services. So the whole focus is for this segment of our grant is on transition issues. Joining us tonight is Elaine Sproat, who is the project director, as well as Peggy Pisano, who is the school psychologist advocate, and Lisa Nathan, who is an advocate, a parent advocate, and a meditator. And they have been they started out as colleagues and they've become dear friends. So with that, what I'd like to do is I'd like to introduce Joyce Hawk. Joyce is the senior family and community educator in the Community Support Network of the Westchester Institute for Human Development. I also have a PowerPoint here, so you just let me know when you want me to bring this up. Please.
Okay, Lisa, you want to?
I think that Lisa and I kind of thought that we would start off, Joyce, and then you could just jump in with your expertise whenever.
Absolutely.
So go to the top. So last week, Joyce talked about transitioning to adult services. And so we're going to just recap a little about what happens before we get to those adult services in terms of what the school district's responsibilities are. And we have some PowerPoint, which you can see. But just go to that next slide. Thank you. So the school district is responsible for having a conversation with you as a parent and the student starting about age 12, as Joyce told us last week, to start thinking about and talking about where your child and where he or she wants to go in their future. And that could be to work, to college, to wherever the future brings that person. So around age 12, most school districts will start having, and in the school district that I worked in, the guidance people would sit and have a conversation with the student and or the parents if they wanted to be involved to talk about what their hopes and dreams were for the future. And we would have that conversation so that the child's voice was heard, the parent's voice was heard, and that the school district could start preparing for the direction that the child was going to go in. And that starts around age 12. As Joyce told us last week, by age 15, that has to be that's called a transition plan. That transition plan starts to be part of the child's IEP, because the goal of the district and the goal of the family and so on and so forth is to start working in the direction of the future. And Lisa kind of pointed out today when we were speaking was that you kind of look at what's happening way in the future and then how do I plan for it almost backwards. So if I want to do something with theater perhaps, then I have to have courses that maybe are in music or art or what have you. So that the school district can prepare the student for where they want to go. And the parent has to be participatory in that so that the voice of the parent also is in there in terms of the interests and preferences of everybody involved. So that really starts at age 12. And then as Joyce told us last week, by age 15, it's a requirement for that to be on the IEP as part of the planning. You could.
So I think the one thing I want to say before we move on is that we've had the opportunity tonight to ask students from my Theories of Social Casework class to join us. So this way they can see what these types of things are like in real life. So for the benefit of the students, first of all, welcome. The other thing is it'd probably be good if you could jot down some notes, because there are going to be terms that are going to be used that we're going to go back and review. Similar things like the IEP process, the transition planning process, and you'll hear from Joyce and from Lisa and Peggy some technical terms. It would be great if you grab some notes.
Okay, and anybody can just kind of raise their hand if I or anybody else says anything that you're not familiar with. But the IEP is the Individualized Education Plan. That's the document that's legal, number one, but also directs the school and the child and the parent in what kind of programs and services the child with a disability needs to support them in their current program and in their future programming. So that's what that IEP means.
Yeah, and this is just a resource that I put together that I handed out to you guys last time, and it's just kind of a little resource for families so that they can kind of start that conversation with their school team. It gives them some ideas of questions to maybe ask, not only to the school district, but to also ask your child, your student.
So briefly, and this is very briefly, because there are many pathways to graduation, and so that most people kind of are aware of the Regents Diploma if they're from New York State. But if you notice here that there are many other pathways. So there's the Regents Diploma, which assumes that the student has mastered whatever particular coursework. There's like 4 credits in English, 4 credits in social studies. There are those requirements. And then they've mastered a certain amount of
If you could mute yourself, that would be great.
I can hear you.
I don't know if they can. If you could mute yourself, that would be great.
Okay, go back.
Molly, can you mute yourself, please?
I can't see the, that's not. If you could mute yourself, that would be great. Okay. Elaine, I don't know if you can see who it is that's not muted.
It's the person MM, I think Molly Morales.
Okay.
Okay, so again, we're talking about the number of pathways there are to graduation. And the one pathway that many people are familiar with is the Regents Diploma. That assumes that the student has mastered the particular coursework. I think it's 22 credits that you have to earn, and that they've passed either 4 or 5 regions. That's only in New York State, by the way. So if you're not a New York State resident, you don't need a Regents Diploma. The next kind of diploma is a local diploma. And it gets kind of complicated, but basically what a local diploma talks about is that if you have an IEP or you have a 504 plan, which, by the way, for those of you that don't know, a 504 is an accommodation plan for people who have some kind of disability, if you will, but they don't need the stringent requirements of special education. They may just need specific accommodations to help support them through their career in school. So if you have either an IEP or a 504, you can get a local diploma. And what essentially that says is that you can pass some of the Regents exams with a lower pass score, lower than 65. You can also get a CDOS, a commencement credential, which says that you've mastered some vocational and occupational kinds of programs. Oftentimes students who go to the BOCES Technical and Training Institute, they may come out with a CDOS. And you can also get a Regents Diploma and a CDOS, depending on what kinds of skills and what kinds of programs you've participated in. And then finally, there's a skills and achievement commencement credential that's usually for students who have alternative assessments. Those are for children who also are students who, have a significant need or significant difficulty with general kind of achievement or academic skills. So there's those kind of 4 pathways to finishing school and to gaining a credential that you finished school and or a diploma. So just there, that participant, the information that's up on the website will explain things in more depth, but we thought that would be an interesting information for parents to just know that there's not just one way to get to finish high school.
And
Right.
you know,
So Peggy, if I could
Sure.
go ahead, but I just want to say
comment
one
here.
thing.
This is a guide that we created because all of the different options are so complicated and all the different requirements are so detailed. School districts are required to have these conversations with families and to also give them written information on all these details. So we thought we would make it easier for everyone and kind of put it in a easy printable one-page brochure that has all of the different details to all the different pathways, the credit requirements, the different types of diplomas, the different processes to appeal scores, the safety net for students with disabilities, which gives you a range of flexible scoring. So, you know, if you were to read this guide, you know, it might not make a lot of sense because there's a lot of details, but it's a good tool to have to go then back to your school district and have the conversations to explore what some of these things mean.
You know, Joyce, when I saw this, I was going to say to you and to your organization, this is a tremendous, it's like a compass. It's because parents, as Lisa will talk about, you know, she's highly trained, highly educated, all ready to go, prepared. And then she gets to that IEP process and she freezes. And that's the beauty of the unified voice between Peggy and Lisa, because typically, historically, they would sit on opposite sides of the table. And now they're sitting on the same side of the table.
Well, and Joyce, thank you for saying that, because you know, in the school district that I was in, we often would give out information because it is very complex and you can kind of get lower scores on certain exams and higher scores, and they sort of, excuse me, balance themselves out. And it is, I mean, we would sit there and pore over, you know, the transcripts of students just to kind of make sure we did it correctly. So it is important for parents to have that kind of information and challenge their school district if in fact their child, you know, meets some of the criteria. But it's very complex. And then there are superintendents who can step in and offer, you know, other documents. And so it gets very complicated.
And it's hard when you hand out, you know, a 10-page document. It's hard to print it. It's hard to distribute it to families. So we really, really work very hard to be able to get all the crucial information, you know, on a one sheet or a front and back. So that the next slide will show you what the other side looks like. And that gives you some of those ideas about all those different types of diplomas and the requirements and all the safety nets. And what we tried to do was, you know, stick to the regulatory language as close as possible, but also have it be where a parent could read it and pretty much understand what it means, you know, or at least be able to start that conversation, bring this to the meetings with their school district and have these conversations so that they understand early as possible what are the options, right? Because that's going to really drive decision making and what kind of programming the student might take. We don't want any surprises.
I just want to ask you something. You're distributing this through to the parents, to the people that access your agency. Is this material also going out to the school district so that they know what parents are looking at?
Yep, we give it to them all the time. When we first developed this, we let them all know that it's accessible. They can go to our website and download it. We really did it with school districts in mind because we know when were they going to have the time now to condense all the information that was out there in order to provide parents with written information. So it was really, you know, to help families, but also to help school districts, because we knew that would be an extreme challenge, as well as, you know, printing off many, many, many pages, because the New York State Education Department does have resources, but they tend to be very lengthy. And that's hard to do. So school districts do know about it. You can download it right off of our website. And many of school districts, you know, have it on hand and have made copies and give these out at CSE meetings.
And that's it, I think, a critical point. I mean, we did that at our CSE meetings at my district, but if in fact you don't get something like this from your CSE chairperson or your special ed department or even your guidance counselor, it's an important document to ask for, whether it comes in this form or other forms. It's a very complex system, even for those people who work in schools, to determine what what will happen and how will a child sort of exit school and with what credentials? And you know, the goal is always to have them exit school with the highest credentials possible. And so there's different pathways to achieve that, obviously.
And I just want to say this for the benefit of the students that have joined us. If we step back and we take a look at the larger picture, what we're really talking about is that a child shows up at a school district, special need is identified, they end up with an IEP process, you know, and the fact is they're working that through the school, and as a result of that, certain services they're entitled to, and parents are advocating and administrators are advocating to make sure that the child is surrounded with these services. However, the focus of our discussion throughout this leg of the grant is on transitions, because once that child moves away from the school district and moves beyond a certain age, the IEP doesn't have the value, it doesn't have the weight that it has before. And in many cases, what parents are concerned about is the fact that their children are going into an abyss because they're surrounded by services, federally mandated, state mandated, but when they age out of high school or when they age beyond that, this dissipates. And I think that's why it's so important that you get a better, you know, a clearer understanding of the importance of this transition period. I know people that have children with autism. The children are 11, 12 years old, and they're starting to think already about what are the services and programs available beyond high school.
So you could go to the next slide. The exit summary is something that you get as your child is exiting high school, at whatever age. Some students exit at age 18, but students with disabilities can stay till age 21. So depending on how long it takes them to get through, the exit summary would be provided at the last CSE meeting and or before that, you know, conversation. But again, everything has led up to this. This is really just a compilation of everything that your student has done throughout their school and high school career. It talks about the strengths of the student, it talks about some of the weaknesses, it talks about where the student is going and their accomplishments in the past years and what they hope to accomplish in the future. And this is a state, in New York State, I guess, a requirement as well. But just if you could scroll down a little bit, it, you know, you can see that, and this is an example of one that it has the strengths and their weaknesses, their academic performance, their independent level, whether they can be independent, whether they're not independent, where you can see that it talks about extensive support, moderate support, minimal supports. So it really talks about all the aspects of a student and how they functioned throughout their school career, but what their needs might be for the future, and you know, kind of where they're headed. So just, you could scroll through that a little bit. So there's career development, what they need, what they want, what level of independence, and you know, in what direction are they headed for their future. There's learning, then there's foundational skills. You can see what kind of things do they have in their sort of repertoire of strengths and weaknesses. Can they read? Can they not read? And you can read all of this for yourself. Lisa and I just decided that we wouldn't go through the whole thing because we would put everybody to sleep. But you can see from that, it really talks about who that person is and who that person has been throughout their school career. And you need to get this. Again, in the district that I was in, the student would get a copy, the parent would get a copy. We would keep a copy in our own files. And so that, because the goal of this is now to give that student some data about themselves and to take that to their next setting. If in fact, you know, they are going to a next setting, either they're going to work or they're going to college or they're going to a vocational program, wherever. And so it gives them information about who they are and just what they needed to do and what they've done throughout their career.
Right. So this form is particularly useful for students who have more significant disabilities. So this particular form is for students who are usually alternately assessed, which means their disabilities are more significant. And we really want to know what level of independence in all these different tasks that students have, because when they transition from high school, they're going to be working with and meeting people that don't know them at all. And so this information is going to be really key to employers, to adult agencies who are going to be providing adult services once students leave. It's really going to give them a good idea about what the student is able to do as a young adult, right? As employability skills go, so that they know what kind of settings they might be successful in, or what kind of supports and services they need. But this tool is really very beneficial. We talk about it a lot for the students who are older and transitioning out, but you could really use this tool as early as elementary school to start monitoring and figuring out what students need as they get older, right? And really focus their instruction and their educational plans on the things that are noted in here. So these student exit summary forms can be a really, really useful tool.
And you have to know that when a child exits school, the IEP kind of exits with them. They don't get an IEP in their next setting. So this exit summary will provide that information that perhaps might have been on an IEP. And so it talks about who they are and who they've been and what they, that they want to accomplish in their future. So go ahead.
When we talk to school staff, we say, don't just cut and paste from an IEP because we already have the IEP. This should be the real, what is your summary of this student, in words that everyone can understand to really help plan for the future. And if you just stop right there for a second, Larry, they are supposed to, in this exit summary, they're supposed to be making recommendations on how to help students reach their long-term goals. So in the last session, we talked about every student has a goal for continued learning, right? Education and/or training. What kind of training program might they need, depending on what their long-term goal for employment might be. An employment goal, how are they going to continue to learn new things and develop their skills? And then importantly, independent living. So these recommendations really should be, this is what the student still needs. And I would like to point out on the left there towards the bottom, right before it says other, it says adult agencies, referrals, and contacts. That's extremely important because we want to know who has the student been connected to? Have they started any application processes for adult services? Were they found eligible for adult services, or are they not connected at all? That is going to save a lot of time and energy and heartache and everything else for families if the people that they're now going to have to be working with in adult services know where they're at. So that's just a really important thing to make sure, that there's some information in there.
So the next slide Lisa's going to discuss with you, because it's a similar slide to things that she has done with her own son. So Lisa, if you want to.
Yeah. Hi, thanks. So I had done something like this when he was younger, because talk about your child's strengths and weaknesses and what their skills are. To me, this gave like a much more visual, condensed version that can really help you understand and refine it. So for instance, I split a house up. So if you say your child likes to work in the kitchen and cook, or do they like to garden? Do they like to work in the yard? Do they like to work with tools? And I, put some icons here, even just to pick out some stuff to say what they might like to do. Do they like to cut and paste? Do they like to work with art? Do they like animals? Do they have pets? Are they social? Is your kid social with family? Do they like to be around other people? Do they prefer to be more alone? I didn't put any technology in here, or I don't have any like hobby stuff, but you could even, create your own. Does your child, what are their hobbies? Do they like photography? Do they like to read or do jigsaw puzzles? All these become clues that you can take and bring to your meetings to talk about their strengths. And I just want to share a story. Whenever you were at a CSE meeting, the Committee for Special Education, and the teachers are sitting around, the administration is there, and you have like a summary of your child's testing that's been done. And every 3 years they do like a psychosocial eval. So they do a complete testing of your child. And my son scores like really low on these tests. And, you know, we obviously have been doing these CSU meetings for years, and it was last year, and I, you know, coming into the meeting, I was sitting there with this thing, and I said to them, guys, can we just not talk about this? Because I don't need to sit there and hear how bad he is, how his difficulties, how he's so low he scores. Can we talk about, you know, Gabriel's strengths and his skills? I'm like, you know, it can't measure, the test can't measure his sense of humor. But my son has an incredible sense of humor. You know, it can't measure his, you know, his social skills, you know, the way he gets along with others. His strengths don't appear on that psychosocial evaluation the way they do in real life when you get to know him. So I think we have to really keep like that whole person in mind. And and you can advocate for that, and, you know, talk about your child's strengths and keep that in mind, because those things are going to play out in the real world much more than the scores on all these fakakta tests they have to take. You know, that you like, you're like, you know, your eyes spin with all these scores. So yeah, so it's something like this, or, you know, you can look for your own thing on, sure, there's many different ones like this that you can use.
Lisa, you know why I like this as well is because the school team only sees the child in the school setting, right? And so some kind of visual like this really captures those other things, right? In a home setting and in the yard and in the community. So it really brings a valuable piece to the student as a whole, because they are going to be transitioning from school to the adult world. So I really like this component because it gives a much richer picture of the whole person.
Yeah.
So you could go to the next slide. What we're going to look at next, and Lisa's going to talk to you, these are specific programs that happen in Orange County, New York. And some of you are not from Orange County, although we are close to Orange County, but there are similar programs throughout the state of New York. I guess our goal really is to kind of expose people to the things that we have in our general environment or vicinity. But certainly there are other similar programs out wherever perhaps you might live. So Lisa, you want to take us through some of those programs that Orange County has to offer? And these are programs that happen after a student exits high school, whatever age that is.
All right. Sorry, I was just looking for something because I don't know if it made it onto the slideshow, Joy. I just want to make sure I have that when we get there. So anyway, you can go to the first slide there. And, sorry, okay. Club Atlas. These are, you know, different. This is one day program available through Greystone programs. And you can see, and a lot of these are very similar. You know, achieve highest level of independence. You'll see that word over and over again. Independent living skills, social skills, community inclusion, very, very important. Self-advocacy, personal capacity and development. So many of these also, and you'll notice here, are without walls. So there's going to be a common meeting place, but then now they're called consumers and not called students anymore. Now your child is a consumer. And they're going to be out in the community. So, you know, I know Meals on Wheels is a big one, friendly visiting, stuff like that, that they'll be out in the community. And what are they going to do? So you can ask, like, what is the program going to do? All right, next slide. This is another one that just came down from Albany recently. Living Resources is this one. And again, it's a day hub without walls. Okay, next slide. Inspire has been around for a long time. Again, day habilitation without walls, as you can see it, as it says. This one is based out of Goshen, New York. And it tells you what we do in the community, who we partner with. So, you know, they partner with organizations in the community because they want to be involved in community life. So they work within the community. And there's another slide for Inspire, I believe. and just says, some of the things that they'll do. So everything from, art classes, they'll go bowling, arts and crafts, animal therapy, yoga, because there's a yoga studio in Goshen, which has been very, very supportive of the special needs community, music, karate, and, because you want your child to have, a real lived experience in the community, and you want them to be out. I know as much as they can be. And you'll have, and an important thing to remember is, what's the age group of, the day hab that you're going to be involved with. And of course, as you can see, as of October 2021, operating at reduced capacity, is everything completely open as it was pre-COVID? Maybe not so much right now, but, hopefully it will get back to running in fully open capacity. Next slide, please. Okay, the ARC New York also has been around for a very long time. You'll see those same, the same thing, community, hygiene, behavioral skills, community, going to the parks, attractions in the county, Meals on Wheels, that's a popular one. And as you can see in the last sentence, program has also organized sessions at OC Orange County Community College and Mount St. Mary College.
And I just want to say
Next
one
slide.
thing before you go on, that for the students,
Yeah.
I'm going to put this video up on the announcement section. You can go back and look at it. And one of the reasons I'd want you to look at it is that each of these places that Lisa's referencing are places for internships and places for potential jobs. So as I told you, any website I take you to or any people I introduce you to, they're all your connections now. The other thing is that as Lisa was talking about this, the one thing that stood out here is Without Walls program. When Peggy and I first started working in state institutions years and years ago, it was mandated that anybody that was in a state institution that lived there had to have 6 hours a day of day programming, but everything was in the institution. This idea of going outside of the institution was foreign to us. Today, this is the key. Without walls, people being invested in the community and integrated into the community. Lisa, go ahead, please.
Could I make one
Yeah,
point,
sorry,
Larry?
it's just the information.
Please.
I just wanted to mention, so day programs are not necessarily always full-time, right? When we think about individuals leaving high school and now they're adults and going into the community, we'd like to think that most of those individuals could possibly work to some degree, right? Even if it's 2 hours a week or just volunteering somewhere, right? But that's not going to be 40 hours a week. So then we say, so what does that individual do with the rest of their day? And that's where day programs fit in. So some day programs might just be 2 days a week, right? For some individuals. Other individuals might have more. So they can be tailored to meet the individual's needs and fill up their life, right? So that they have a quality life and feel productive with a combination of other supports and services. So it's just important to keep that in mind, that it's not always, all or nothing. It can be a mixture.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
if I could just jump in for a second, it's a difficult transition for parents. It's a transition for students, but it's also a difficult transition for parents because they're used to their child going to school, 7:30 to 2:30 or whatever it is every day. And so some of the programs, especially in the COVID world, unfortunately, but even before COVID, are not 5 days a week, like, as you said, Joyce, 40 hours. And so that's an eye opener for parents as well, because some people can't, their children can't stay home alone because, they need supports. And so it's a very difficult transition for parents to understand that, where is my child going to go all day long, 5 days a week? So it's a hard thing all the way around for parents, for students, for even the school district. When people are transitioning out of school, we worry about what's going to happen now, where are they going to go, kind of thing. So.
Yeah. And Larry, before you go, I just want to roll back one There was one more here. I just want to tell people that's the Winslow Therapeutic Riding Center, if you're not familiar with it, in Warwick, New York. And they also have a day have program that work with horses and work outside. I don't think, this one I don't think is out in the community much, but they work, they have like a farm, they do gardening, they work with horses. So it's a very unique program. And before we go to the resources page, or you can, I just want, there's a list of questions for day habs, because I asked Joyce, I said, it's important to, because you will have to like interview the day hab programs to see if it's appropriate for your child. So some questions might be like, how many individuals are in the program and what's the age range? You want your child in an appropriate age range with the other individuals, the other consumers in the program. And as you mentioned, Joyce, how many days or partial days a week would your individual, would your child participate? And what are the timeframes? You got to know, you have to plan for this. And how much time is spent doing activities in the community, and specifically, what are those activities? If they're doing, if 80% of those things are things that your kid doesn't like to do, well, there's no sense sending them, because you want to weigh out that they're going to enjoy being in that program. And is there a consistent schedule of activities? For instance, like Monday, they're going to the movies, Tuesday to lunch, maybe Wednesday bowling, is there a routine? And because your child may really like a routine. And skill development activities are. And we saw many of them list them, such as personal hygiene, cooking, money skills, employability, soft skills, like Peggy and I spoke about this, how to shake somebody's hand, how to have, be able to look at somebody in the eye and talk to them. So stuff like that. And big one, what are the transportation arrangements from the day program? Because boy, do we get used to that school bus coming to pick your kid up. So, and it's major. That's a major, big question to ask. How's your kid going to get there? How many, and this is also really, really critical based on your child and their needs, how many direct care staff are present at all times? It might be, one adult for 6 consumers, or maybe one adult for 10 consumers. You have to know what that ratio is. Again, you're very, very used to having a classroom, whatever it is, a 612, a 1212, a 613, you're very used to having a certain program in the schools. But Dorothy, this is not Kansas anymore. So, this is different. Do the program staff, or is there a nurse to administer medication if your child needs medication? Again, we take it for granted. We've had nurses in every school our kids go to. And what are the emergency safety protocols? How much guidance will your child need if there's an emergency or they need to be led to safety? What happens? Hey, snow days, people, what happens if you need to be notified of program closure? We're used to getting those, our texts and our phone calls, on loop. But again, we take this stuff for granted. And also a big one, and difficult at this time, but having you and your child visit or observe the program to see if they'd like it. And you have the right to do that, because they want to make sure it's a good fit, as well as you make sure it's a good fit. And then we have, from Joyce, we have all these great transition resources. This is like the meat and potatoes of, of what parents with special needs need. They need all these resources. You put it, you store it somewhere, you keep it on your phone, on your computer, and boy, it's very helpful.
Well, look, this has been unbelievable. The thing that people need to know is it's not like you've practiced this, the 3 of you, but you've made it seamless, from the application perspective as a worker in the field, from the school psychologist perspective, from the parent advocate perspective. And the benefit of this is that whether you're on here tonight speaking with us, or something that you review, and I know that some agencies are even using these videos for in-service training, the takeaway message is you don't have to do this alone. And there are people out there that you can access, either through our proactive caring individual, to Peggy, to Lisa, to Joyce. You don't have to do this alone. And I think that's key. One of the trademarks of our presentation, and this has been said by Joyce and by Peggy and by Lisa, this is a stressful time. I'm going to stop sharing this now. This is a very stressful time, not only for individuals that are going through it, but family systems that are going through it. And the one thing that is key to what we're doing is we're talking about the integration of mindfulness-based stress reduction. And Lisa, as now a practiced meditator, runs us always through some type of very quick and simple meditative practice. So I'd ask her to do that as we bring this to summary.
Unmute myself. Okay. You know, and we've used this word a lot, and it is, I'm actually living this right now, and it's very easy to be overwhelmed. But, you know, I often remind myself, but you can only start from where you are. You know, you may wish you had this, you may wish you had that, but truly we can only ever be where we are at the very moment. And that segues us right into our meditation practice, because we're reminded as I sit here, close my eyes, and I already feel my body starting to relax. When you relax your body, you relax your mind. I take a deep breath. We can all do that. Inhale through our nose. And just blow it out through our mouth. And feel connected to our body sitting on our chair. Because even if you're overwhelmed, you know, every breath is a new moment. Every breath brings us back to the present moment. And it's only in the present moment that we can truly change. It's the present moment that will guide us. When we can let the loops of the past and the future, the agitation between worrying about the past or dwelling on the past or worrying about the future, we can let those loops go. We're not going to stop them, but we just need to let them float by and bring ourselves back to our present moment. And if we bring ourselves back, our attention to our bodies, our breath, sitting in the chair, because our bodies can only ever be in the present moment. It takes us out of our stress mode. And when we connect with our breath, we can connect with that thinking part of our brain again. So it just puts us here, brings us to the present moment where we can say, okay, now I'm ready. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Joyce. Thank you, Peggy. So at this point, for a few minutes, what we do is we open it up for comment, reaction, observation, and exchange. So please join us in, having a thought about, and Kaylee's, I don't mean to look at you directly because you got that baby boomer thing there on your tagline, but let me look at you because you've always been very insightful. What do you think about what's been said?
Thank you for that, Larry, and thank you, Joyce, and Lisa, and Peggy. I hope I got all names correct. I was just awestruck by the level of the organizational infrastructure that's set up for all of the services, the educational planning and programming. designed to work with the subject population that we're talking about. And I really was struck by Lisa's emphasis on understanding who the individual child is outside of the educational context, because that was so important for me to have that answer. I'm aware through certain readings and observations that children with so-called disabilities, and I don't like that term, but we'll go with that since we're using that, but that there are hidden gifts and talents and strengths that our world, our society just not have been able to tap into, and we are busily trying to mold these students and children into following the so-called normal patterns of our world. But I really do think more emphasis, and I hope that Lisa's program and her passion for it will take the focus more to understanding what are the hidden gifts that this particular population has been given that we're not even aware of yet. I'm really the one example I would give is there was a program that that's emphasized some students or adults with special abilities that was very, very important when the tech organizations understood what they were able to do with programming and coding. It was just phenomenal to hear what that particular segment of the population was able to contribute. So I think that we have a untapped resource here that with the programs that's described here will begin to uncover. So I want to just say that, acknowledge the appreciation for that, and glad to be able to have attended this and to see what is actually available at this time.
No, thank you, Kayleigh. And you reminded me, when I worked for the state, I used to have to go to this program up in Columbia County called Camp Hill. And it was based upon a model that was created in Europe during World War II in order to provide haven for people that were older and also people that were disabled in order to provide them a safe haven. And it's based upon the philosophy of Rudolf Steiner, who's an Austrian philosopher, who believed in reincarnation and multiple lives. And when I would go up there with first working for the state, and then I worked there with them for about 2 years as a consultant, I would go up and I'd make recommendations. And they would say, thank you, doctor, but you need to come back tomorrow. And the reason you need to come back tomorrow is we need to go home and dream on this tonight. And what it was it's 600 acres, 60 homes, people living together, villagers and co-villagers. They were not people with disabilities. They were considered to be co-villagers. Everything was based upon an agricultural model. I used to say to Peg, if I'm not back in 3 days, come and get me, because it was just so attractive, the whole model. And the thing is that there was no staff. There were villagers and co-villagers. Everybody lived together. So they lived in different homes. There was no 4 to 12 staff, 12 to 8 staff. Everybody lived together. No one got paid. It was based upon a communal model. But they had the belief, the connection based upon anthroposophy, I think it was called. It was the connection between plant and animal and human. But they had a belief that people that were experiencing disabilities will really have been reincarnated into a life of relaxation, where they were to be served. And it was such a different paradigm. Okay, the fact that, the intent here is to provide service to individuals that have a disability, whatever the disability is, was the reincarnated life. And it was just, it was fascinating to see people not only talk about it, but actually live it. They were actually living it. Clifford, comment before we wrap up.
As usual, I'm in awe, particularly the fact that I'm the only one here from Suffolk County. So I have a request to Joyce. Joyce, if you would contact your counterpart at Post or at Hoft, wherever they are, and suggest they participate in this, because we're not getting any services where my community is, and they might not even know we exist. So if they can cook up in this meeting and I can maybe connect with them, that'd be really great.
Sure.
That's great. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Bin or Su Ling, comments, reactions, reflections?
Yeah, so I have few words because as a parent, I'm going through this process. I'm still in the middle of that. So one side, we see a complicated system here from school, from adult service, social work, everything. It's so complicated. I just see, like me, a guy who can very dedicated. I have some English knowledge here. I can reading, I can talking to somebody. So imagine immigrant with limited English. So it's like a hard thing. But on the other side, okay, another difficulty is that as a parent, I really don't know how much my child can do, can go as far there. I was never autistic or ADHD. I cannot protect like what future it is. So we always like thinking, okay, we keep changing our target because I think, oh, sometime I'm probably too rosy. Sometime they will probably think too little there. So the realization to my child self, I have to understand his real ability is, what his potential is. This is it's a very, very confusing and difficult process on the parent side because most of the decision really is under my guide or my, the family guide to him. He don't know what the future is, this one. But how can I tell? I always think like maybe I do too much or maybe I'm too little. If I can do this, if I can do. So when I listened to that Z1, I saw, hey, how much thing I missed when I was in the school, okay? Because one thing is I'm so overwhelming. I have so many options there, so many there. I really don't know what it is. But by the end, all the option is falling to my shoulder, to my wife's shoulder, because hey, you guys need to decide what to do. But I really don't much experience. Okay, so one thing is more difficult is I don't have much family relationship, social relationship here, so I can go reference to say, hey, your child already going through all this one. Can you give me advice? Let me see what your child can do, what he's doing there, right? So that is really I feel that right now we have so many resources like Joyce, like Dr. Payne's here. So I hope that we can give the new parents more hope, more help, more guidance, more real experience, tell them what is really going on, what is really the future, because I know lots of children on the spectrum are very, very talented, but their talent cannot be realized because they put in the wrong position or wrong direction of it. So meanwhile, I think I'm feel very comfortable right now because I put my child, put him on a position which is he can do a job himself, right? So he have confidence, all his day schedule is around his working schedule. I don't need to worry about lots of other services. I just need some service on the weekend. Okay, so it is just like Joyce said, a planned transition is the best transition. That's definitely. I need every parent know about this one, So I hope that everybody, more and more parents can get benefits it. It's a great project, and I hope we can have more of that.
Well, thank you. And again, our gratitude for your willingness to translate this into Chinese. Anyone else?
Yeah.
Doris, comment, reflection?
Yes, I would like to say something. I just want to thank you guys for putting this together. And I got a couple of resources, which is great because I'm in the process now. My son graduates in June of 2022. So far I've been making a list of different places, and I visited a couple of day have programs because I want to make sure, like Lisa said, you find the fit that's good for, my son, which is he loves sports and he loves being out in the community. And he always likes helping out. So his gifts are that he loves art and he loves music. So I want to make sure I find a place, or even after activities during the day or evening, where he can still go and do those activities he's doing after school now. So I think it's important also to have like a recreational social type of sports program that they can go to. So that my son belongs to 3 of them, which is great because that keeps him busy every day. And even on the weekends, he goes to sports programs. So and it keeps him active. It keeps him active, walking, running, and doing all kinds of activities. But so that's
Oh,
about
Joyce,
it. But
one of
I
the
think Peggy
important
wanted to
things.
say, go ahead, Joyce.
yeah,
I'm sorry. One of the important
No, it's
things,
just
I mean, is to just make sure that you're eligible for services. Like that is the
Yes.
first step, right? Like
yes,
talk about programs sometimes, but then parents miss the piece that
yeah.
you have to
Yeah,
become
no, he is.
eligible
We are
before-
already.
Okay,
Yeah,
perfect.
we have everything, settled
Great.
with OPWDD, the self-direction. At 21, we have to go back and do his program again, not the program, the life plan again, because he goes into an adult program
Right.
and he needs to have adult services, an adult budget. So yeah.
Good. Peg?
And some agencies, in the COVID world, life may be different, but I know up by us, ARC used to run a recreational program and they would
Yes.
send out a calendar, every
Yes.
month of, when we were going bowling, when we were going horseback
Yeah,
riding.
yeah,
and stuff like
yeah.
that. So, some agencies may still do that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Probably a little more difficult in today's world, but
Yeah. Yeah.
those are the kinds of things I think you're thinking of, that you want to keep him busy and you want to keep him busy in the things that he enjoys. And that's
Yeah.
important.
Yeah.
All right, so as we bring this to
Thank you.
close, anyone else, my students, please, a tip of the hat to you for being here. And again, the connections that we bring to the table are now your connections. And the beauty of this is you get to see what it's really like and the experiences of families and the experiences of agencies. So again, thank you so much. And we'll be back in 2 weeks and we will put this up on our Digital Resource Center and our YouTube channel. And Elaine has done an incredible job of developing a monthly newsletter, and we'll send out contact for that too. So be well, and thank you so much. And thank you, Joyce. Thank you for
Joyce.
coming back, and Lisa and Peggy and Elaine as always.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.